Copyrights of the music. All right. Freedom EM. I think the last time I checked out, I don't know if you're monetized yet, as far as having 1,000, but if not, that's cool. Whoops.
It's on.
Yes.
It's all on.
It's the reason why I'm here.
Everybody.
Yes.
Get set up here.
I'm a leg humper of this guy.
I'm giving a speech. I'm shockingly nervous. It's okay. I won't show it.
Let's get closer.
Hello, everyone. Hi. My name's Harrison Smith, and I wanted to start today.
I'm not Billy.
A little piece of advice that my dad gave me. He texted me this morning, and he said this: "I hope your speech goes well today. My unsolicited advice: let the big dog eat." Now, I have no idea what that could possibly mean, so if you can figure it out, find me backstage and let me know. As some of you may know, I host a show called American Journal on InfoWars each and every weekday morning, 8 to 11 Central Standard Time at Band.video, brought to you by Survival Shield X3, now back in stock and on sale at InfoWars store.
Yes.
So some X3 fans in the house, good to see.
Or X2.
We cover, of course, political news, current events, and culture, or what we refer to as a satanic cabal conspiracy trying to enslave humanity. And that means that every day, I wake up, like we all do, to a dizzying array, a maelstrom of horrors beyond human comprehension. And it can seem overwhelming at times to deal with the headlines from street crime and violence, to the indoctrination of children, to deep state corruption, to billionaires spraying chemicals in the air to try to block out the sun, and now they're trying to ban food. It can all seem incredibly hopeless. Even the occasional piece of good news that scuttles across my desk or my screen is hardly a relief. It's more like a brief, teasing respite, like a man patting you on the back and saying, "You're doing great, kid," before he returns to the task of beating you to death. I'm actually not hopeless, though. America does not have a terminal illness. She has a treatable infection called communism. In fact, if we're going to get back on the right track in this country, I think that's the way that we should be thinking about this, like a doctor, a very sick patient in desperate need of intervention. And to extend or possibly abuse the metaphor, like doctors, we should look to the Hippocratic Oath, that solemn pledge that doctors used to make before it was rewritten to include diversity and equity. But the old Hippocratic Oath said this: "I will apply for the benefit of the sick all measures that are required, avoiding those twin traps of overtreatment and therapeutic nihilism." Overtreatment in the political sense might be something like fascism, saying, "Do whatever it takes, just end this madness. Liberty is a small price to pay for a little bit of peace and quiet." The cure, remember, should never be worse than the sickness. We are not here to talk about the vaccine. The other thing we're supposed to avoid is more insidious and I think more dangerous. Therapeutic nihilism. Therapeutic nihilism is what we on the internet call the black pill. That is, it can actually feel good to be hopeless. It can feel good to surrender, to stop fighting. Hey, if you give up, you'll never be disappointed.
I don't like that idea, Denise.
You might even feel a sense of intellectual superiority.
Of course, the bus would be attacked.
After all, those hopeful people, they're just naive.
Making a
If they do
bulletproof
as much
bus.
as you do, they'd be hopeless too. But no, you're not more enlightened just because you're despondent. Hopelessness is a self-fulfilling prophecy, but so is hope. And whenever I feel that abject negativity arise at the back of my mind, I have to remind myself that that's exactly what they want. And I hate them. And I refuse to give in to them out of sheer petulant stubbornness. But it can still be psychologically sickening to see headlines about the wars, the homelessness, the continuing existence of the Clintons. At times, I wish I could just ignore these things, live in blissful ignorance. But just because you don't think about something doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. Whether you like it or not, Klaus Schwab is out there somewhere, probably eating babies. Bill Gates is wandering the earth, splicing cow DNA with cockroaches just to see what happens. George Soros is, as we speak, uploading his consciousness to some sort of supercomputer so he can bother us for eternity. The globalist transhuman psychotics are trying to take over, whether we like it or acknowledge it or not. Personally, I'm against it. That's right. I don't want to live under this Dolores Umbridge meets Big Brother slave system of these vampires. We're at war for humanity, and they understand how to wield the psychological weaponry. These people feed on misery. They bombard us with the chaotic, frenetic madness of their creation, crisis upon crisis, cataclysm upon cataclysm, in order to offer a solution that never actually solves anything and only gives them more power and more control. The initial problem is only compounded by their ridiculous reaction, and again we are submerged in the floodwaters of chaos. So what are we supposed to do? We can't ignore this. We can't ignore what's going on around us. We also can't bear to read the news without feeling helpless and overwhelmed. To further overextend our medical metaphor, we should think about this queasiness that normal, decent human beings feel when they're reading headlines, like a sort of motion sickness, the nausea that you feel in the back of a car that's speeding down a winding highway. And for somebody who gets motion sickness, you probably already know that the solution to this is to look at something in the distance. If you set your eyes on some far-off tower or cloud, you're able to hold on to a steady, constant image while the dizzying blur of the foreground races around you. So let's fix our eyes on some distant point. Let's rise out of the quagmire of daily disorientation and find a point in the future that we can actually strive for. Now, if you look 10, 20, or 100 years in the future, do you see a world worth striving for? If you don't, that's the whole problem, isn't it? How do you run a race if you don't know where the finish line is? Certainly the cost of freedom is eternal vigilance, but how can we fight a war if there's no hope of ever setting down our swords again, even in victory? We know that humans can put up with just about anything as long as they're fighting for something they believe in. The fetid foxholes of the First World War were endured by soldiers because they believed in their cause, their duty, and their nation. Find a cause worth fighting for and nothing is too great to bear. If you have no purpose, however, then even the slightest inconvenience can be intolerable. So we must have something to fight for, not just something we're fighting against. We have to be able to conjure an image of victory before we can even begin to achieve it. And I think that's where art comes in. One of the reasons I was excited to talk about this event and honored to be asked to speak is because of the focus on art. And if you really think about it, all art is some form of storytelling. Paintings, photographies, music, literature, of course the most impactful medium I think is film. All of these tell stories. Even a building tells a story about the people who built it. Humans are the only beings to tell stories, but we didn't exactly invent them. Stories just exist. They're real and we're all part of them. This event is a story, every day is a story. Every day we're painting hundreds, thousands of little stories. But what's the real story? What's the real overarching narrative being played out on Theater Earth? You hear this a lot, the narrative. What do people mean when they talk about the narrative? You hear things like the narrative of police violence, the narrative of white supremacy. Well, these are all manifestations of a wider story, like individual scenes that together make a film or single words strung together to make a sentence. What is the story that we collectively tell ourselves? I know what the enemy's story is. We all do, because they understand the importance of the narrative and have willfully shaped the one that we know to meet their devious ends. Their story goes something like this. Everything was going great until those dastardly white people showed up. Everything was peace and harmony until those white Christian European men decided to do colonialism all over the place and the Crusades and invent slavery and do the Holocaust. The systems these evil men built continue to oppress everyone who's not like them, and worst of all, they caused climate change. The earth is warming, the ocean's rising, life itself is going extinct, but the globalists will save you. Greed and hate are literally destroying the world, they tell us, but only by letting our benevolent billionaire masters form a global government and limit emissions and constrict population growth will nature survive. Humans, they tell us, are a virus, and central bank digital currency social credit score is the cure. It's got all the elements of a great story. Big bad guy, beleaguered underdog heroes, stakes as high as they could possibly be. They're saving the world. They won't stop telling us. And the urgency of all of this is extremely compelling. We can spend forever talking about every aspect of this lie, and that every aspect of it is a lie.
Thanks, Jay.
We can pick apart every one of the claims of this storyline, trying to undermine the foundation of their narrative, but to what end? Their story won't be defeated by logic. It's not born by logic. To defeat their narrative, we have to put forward our own narrative, not just break theirs down. Our response has to be a positive assertion of the truth, not just a negation of the lie.
Thanks, Freedom.
And the good news is that our narrative, the narrative of patriotism, justice, prosperity, is actually true. It doesn't actually need fabrication, only elucidation. For inspiration, let's look at a model for this renaissance, the nation of El Salvador, of all places, under the administration of President Bukele. In just 3 years, that tiny country has gone from the highest murder rate in the world to one of the lowest, per purging the populace of entrenched criminality and reclaiming the blessings of liberty for all of their citizens. Bukele said in a speech to his police forces, quote, we humans are lucky to be instruments of God, all of us, to bring peace, liberty, and happiness to the Salvadorian people. He explains that countries that value things like bravery, strength, discipline, patriotism, honor, and loyalty inevitably rise, and that it's with those loss of those very values that will inevitably lead to decline. Those are the same values that once built America, and it's in those values that glory can again be found. Modernity is not synonymous with chaos and misery. The choice between living in a modern, hellish, scientific death cult of civilization or living alone in the hut in the woods is a false dichotomy. We actually really can have it all. We really can have technology and human connection, science and purpose. And this is the narrative that we have to manifest. That the blessings of modernity and the beauty of tradition can be combined and enjoyed together under the auspices of a people dedicated to virtue. We don't want to turn back time to some heroic earlier age. Rather, we want to bring those heroic virtues with us as we build a future for everyone. And to get there, it's great to see you. We have to reclaim the institutions. And we have in order to reclaim the institutions, we have to actually have popular support. In order to have popular support, we have to unite in a positive and universal message. And to be honest, it's really simple as making patriotism cool again. And the good news is that we have a couple of major advantages in this battle. After all tries they might to sell an image of progressive style, leftism really isn't cool. They really are just snitches and bootlickers and whiny children. They're like teachers' pets and trend-following hipsters. You know what is cool? George Washington crossing the Delaware, Abe Lincoln freeing the slaves, Alex Jones yelling at billionaires with the bullhorn. It's true. But in addition to simply being awesome, we have another major advantage. And that is our message is true. We don't need the endless censorship required to prop up a lie. We need only to let the cat out of the bag. It's one of my favorite sayings. Has anyone here ever tried to put a cat into a bag? It's literally impossible. So once the truth is out, it's out for good. Most of the truth we champion doesn't even need to be explained in the first place. It's just the natural consequence of honest observation. It's like things like what is a woman? It's like no one needs to tell anybody what is a woman. You have to censor and propagandize in order to even have that be a question these days. Humor, honesty, courage, these are actually weapons of mass destruction in the information war. And I'm not just blowing smoke. This isn't just hope without foundation. Look at what's happened in just the last few weeks. #1 song in the world, maybe it's been knocked down by this point, but for a couple days, Boycott Target, performed by somebody who was on this stage yesterday. The popular boycotts of these globalist organizations is crippling them, overpowering the influence and machinations of the bankers and money printers. The documentary, What is a Woman?, has been seen by over 100 million people since it premiered on Twitter 2 days ago. And these numbers are astonishing, and they should really give us all hope, reinforcing the power of unbridled truth and fearless adherence to reality. Really, the Great Awakening is on, and we should be pressing forward like an army chasing down its routed foe. And this is an information war, a culture war, and a war for the narrative that guides the path of humanity, and our weapons are the stories that we tell. And like the Art of War says, if you know yourself, that's half the battle. If you know yourself and your enemy, victory is assured. But there's an addendum to that. See, when you truly know your enemy, then you understand your enemy, and you love your enemy, just like Christ commanded. And as Martin Luther King was apt to remind us, only love can defeat hate. So whether it's an ancient Chinese warlord, the Nazarene son of God, or a black civil rights leader from the 60s, history is firmly on our side. And the story in which we now participate is the ever-present drama of good versus evil. The story we have to tell people is just basically the story of America. It's the story of men without masters, of a country founded on the Christian virtues of individual sovereignty and communal endeavors, where the shackles of race, class, and privilege and creed are all severed by the sword of blind justice. Of an experiment unprecedented in human history, and how that experiment has been subverted and manipulated over the last 100 years by a shadowy cabal, that's them, who figured out that they can have all the benefits of power with none of the obligations by ruling from the shadows, controlling puppets in the public eye and enforcing clandestine agendas through international controlled intelligence agencies. About how their plans have been revealed, their control contested, and humanity is awakening to the invisible chains that bind us. Like Gulliver waking on the Lilliputian beach, humanity's opened its eyes and sees the straps now holding it down, and we've only just begun to strain against those binds. And also in terms of the other aspect, not therapeutic nihilism, but over-treatment,
So now I am
don't
buffering.
become the thing they paint you as. Don't get frustrated that we haven't won immediately. It took them decades to get to this point, and it's not going to get rolled back overnight. It's actually not going to take us decades to reverse this. It's going to be a lot quicker. But we're not looking for some wave, some red wave to crash over. We're looking for a tidal shift, and this has already begun. So I'll end with a quote from Saint Seraphim, who said this: "The greatest temptation of all is to despair, to give up on ourselves and on God. Let us always hope in God's mercy and strive to be better." Thanks.
Yay. All right, trying to adjust. Yeah. Trying to not buffer.